All right. Buckle up, everybody. We're diving deep into John 2 today.
Ooh, John 2.
Yeah. And we've got some excerpts from a Bible study guide to help us unpack this chapter. It covers some pretty crucial moments in Jesus' early ministry. And honestly, I'm just really curious.
Yeah.
John chose to highlight these particular stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why these? What's the connection between a wedding celebration and like righteous anger in the temple? What can we learn about Jesus and ourselves even through them?
That's a great question. And you know what makes it even more fascinating?
Right.
John, compared to the other gospel writers, chose to include relatively few miracles.
Really?
So the fact that he kicks off Jesus' public ministry with the wedding at Cana, I mean, that tells us something's important here. Something's going on.
Okay, so let's try to picture this wedding scene, right? It's a party, people are celebrating, and then they run out of wine.
Uh-oh.
Not exactly the end of the world, but definitely a party foul in that culture.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Huge party foul.
Big time. And this is where we see Jesus stepping in, right? Not just as a helpful guest, but performing his first public miracle.
Turning water into wine.
Yes, exactly. But I've always kind of been struck by how low-key this miracle is. I mean, turning water into wine
Yeah.
compared to like parting the Red Sea.
Right.
It almost seems mundane.
You think so? That's what makes it so intriguing. It'd be easy to dismiss it like, oh, that's just a nice gesture.
Right.
But our source points out that John intentionally calls these miracles signs.
Signs.
Yeah. They're not just about solving a practical problem, right? They're pointing towards something much, much bigger.
So it's like those signs on the highway.
Oh, yeah.
They're not the destination,
Yeah.
but they tell you where you're headed.
You got it. Exactly. These signs, they reveal Jesus's true identity, his purpose. It's like John saying, hey, pay attention. There's more to this Jesus than meets the eye.
I'm starting to see that,
Yeah.
but I'm still struggling, I guess.
Yeah.
How does turning water into wine, how does that connect to Jesus's ultimate purpose?
Oh, you mean his death on the cross?
His death on the cross, yeah.
Well, John really emphasizes that through this miracle, Jesus manifested his glory. But we got to understand that glory in this context isn't about, fame or spectacle.
Yeah.
It's about God's character being revealed.
So it's less about the wow factor and more about what it reveals about God.
Yes. And in this abundant, this overflowing wine,
Yeah.
we see a glimpse of God's abundant grace, which, ultimately finds its fullest expression in Jesus' sacrifice.
Wow, that's really making me think. I never considered that connection before.
Oh, pretty amazing.
It is. But then the source also mentions, well, some scholars don't even believe this miracle literally happened.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Ah,
They think maybe it was a joke about the water being, the best wine.
like a metaphor.
Yeah, like a metaphor.
Interesting.
Or even a reflection of stories about the Greek god Dionysus. What do you make of that?
Well, it's definitely important to acknowledge, there are different interpretations out there.
Sure.
But the source we're looking at, it argues that the kind of the simplicity and the natural flow of John's account,
Yeah.
well, it points to it being a historical event. Plus, if it was just a joke, would it have really led the disciples to believe in Jesus as the Messiah?
Good point. Yeah. That seems unlikely.
Doesn't it?
It fits much better with like the larger themes
Yeah.
that John's developing about Jesus as the source of life and grace.
Yeah.
But speaking of doing the unexpected,
Yeah.
Jesus seems to do something very ungracious in the next scene by disrupting the temple.
What happens there?
What's going on there?
Yeah, what's the deal with that?
So we move from a wedding celebration to the bustling scene of the temple during Passover.
Okay.
Jerusalem is packed with pilgrims.
Yeah.
There's that sense of anticipation, excitement, and also a lot of commerce happening.
Oh, I bet. The temple courts would have been crowded with people buying sacrificial animals, exchanging currency.
Yeah.
Chaos.
Exactly. And into this scene walks Jesus. Well, he flips tables, drives out the money changers and animals with a whip.
Whoa.
It's a powerful image of Jesus confronting corruption, challenging the religious system. But it seems a bit out of character, though, doesn't it?
How so?
I mean, Jesus is all about love and forgiveness.
Right.
This feels so angry.
It does, doesn't it? And I think that's why this story is so compelling. It forces us to confront that question, what makes Jesus angry? What are the things that break God's heart?
That's a great question. It's definitely making me rethink my assumptions about Jesus just being like a gentle, passive figure.
Right.
But on the surface, it seems like he's actually making things harder for the pilgrims, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they need to buy animals, they need to exchange money to participate in these Passover rituals.
And that's the irony. By disrupting this marketplace.
Jesus is actually making spiritual access easier.
Yeah.
He's clearing a path for true worship.
Okay.
He's reminding people the temple is supposed to be a house of prayer, not a den of thieves.
So it's not about the ritual itself,
Yeah.
but the heart behind it.
Exactly. And when the religious leaders demand a sign
Oh, yeah.
to justify his actions,
Right?
Jesus gives this, well, it's kind of a cryptic response.
What'd he say?
He's like, destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days.
Oh, wow.
Now, at the time, they took him literally.
And they probably thought he was crazy.
Yeah.
But John's giving us, his readers, the benefit of hindsight.
Right.
We know he's actually talking about his own body, right?
Yeah, John's always pointing us to the deeper meaning.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating here is that Jesus is the new temple,
Whoa.
the dwelling place of God. No longer a physical building,
Right.
but God dwelling among humanity in a very real, tangible way.
Hold on. Think about that. You become the dwelling place of God.
What does that mean? For how you live,
Yeah.
how you treat your body, how you interact with others.
That's such a profound question.
Isn't it?
It leads us right into the heart of what John's trying to communicate.
I think we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah, we are.
There's so much more to uncover.
I can't wait. It really is mind-blowing, isn't it?
It is.
When you consider that we become the dwelling place of God. It's like taking that, the grandeur and holiness of the temple,
right,
and internalizing it.
Yeah. But this idea of God dwelling within us, isn't that kind of a New Testament concept?
You mean?
Wasn't the temple like the central focus of worship in Jesus' time?
You're right, the temple was central, but what's fascinating is that Jesus is already pointing towards a shift in understanding. It's like he's saying the old way of relating to God, through a specific place, through rituals, it's changing.
So it's less about where you worship.
Yeah.
And more about how, or maybe who you're worshiping.
Exactly. Jesus is emphasizing that. He is the new focal point, the new way to connect with God.
Okay.
And that connection, well, it isn't confined to a building.
Right.
It's something that happens within each individual.
It's like he's taking something very external and making it deeply personal.
It is. And you know what's so beautiful about that?
Yeah.
John doesn't shy away from the fact that even Jesus's closest disciples, they didn't fully grasp this at the time.
Really?
Oh, yeah. He writes, when therefore he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the word that Jesus had spoken.
It's like they needed that hindsight, that experience of the resurrection to truly understand what Jesus was getting at. And honestly, it makes me feel a little less inadequate, maybe, for not always understanding things right away,
Oh, for sure. I think that's one of the things I love about John's gospel. It acknowledges the process of faith. We don't have to have it all figured out from the start. Yeah.
There's room for growth, for questioning, for those aha moments that come with time and experience.
That is encouraging to hear. It also makes me think about our source's point about, well, there being at least 3 Passovers described in John.
Oh, right.
Which suggests Jesus cleansed the temple twice.
Wait, twice?
Yeah. Once at the beginning of his ministry.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And once, well, near the end.
It's a detail that's easy to miss.
Isn't it?
But it raises a fascinating question. Why would John include that first cleansing if it wasn't significant?
Maybe it's like foreshadowing.
Yeah.
The first cleansing sets the stage for what's to come, this challenge to the religious system. And then the second cleansing, closer to his death, it's like a final, I don't know, exclamation point.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. It's like he's drawing a line in the sand.
Right.
Saying, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, and I'm not backing down.
There's a real sense of urgency there.
Yeah, there is. Even though his death is still in the future.
Right.
But shifting gears a bit.
Yeah.
Our source points out something interesting about how the master of ceremonies at the wedding, he marvels at the quality of the wine.
Yeah.
totally oblivious to the miracle behind it.
Right. And that's such a powerful analogy for how we often experience God's grace.
How so?
We might be enjoying, the wine, the blessings, the good things in our lives,
Right.
without fully understanding the source or the incredible lengths that Jesus went to provide it.
This reminds me of when I was going through a really tough time,
Oh, yeah.
feeling lost, unsure of what to do next. And out of the blue, this opportunity I'd never even considered, it just fell into my lap.
Wow.
Looking back, it felt like a miracle, but at the time,
Yeah.
I almost took it for granted, like it was just luck.
It's easy to focus on the what of our blessings and miss the who behind them. But what's so amazing is that just like that abundant wine at Cana, God's grace, it's poured out for us lavishly, freely, without any strings attached.
It's a good reminder that God's working behind the scenes, even when we're not aware of it.
Wow.
Our source also talks about how, the world with its gifts may please the eye and fascinate the senses, but it proves to be unsatisfying. That which was begun with songs and mirth ends in weariness and disgust. It's like a warning, isn't it?
It is, and I think it speaks to the fleeting nature of worldly pleasures.
Okay.
They might offer a temporary high, a distraction,
Right.
but they don't truly satisfy. It's like chasing after a mirage.
Oh, yeah.
You think you've found what you're looking for, but it always disappears just when you think you've reached it.
It's that feeling of, is this all there is? Like you've reached the top of the mountain, and instead of feeling fulfilled, you just feel empty.
Exactly. But Jesus offers something completely different.
Oh.
A joy that runs deep, a satisfaction that comes from being connected to something bigger than ourselves.
It's like the difference between a sugar rush and a nourishing meal.
I like that.
The world's gifts are like that sugar rush, a quick burst of energy followed by crash. But Jesus offers true sustenance.
Right.
That kind of spiritual nourishment that sustains us through life's ups and downs.
I love that analogy. And just like a good meal leaves you feeling satisfied and energized, experiencing God's grace, it fills us with a sense of purpose and joy that overflows into everything we do.
Like the source says, the gifts of Jesus are ever fresh and new. The feast that he provides for the soul never fails to give satisfaction and joy. It's a feast that never ends.
And that's what makes it so incredible. It's not a one-time event. It's an ongoing experience of being filled and transformed by God's love.
This whole conversation, it's giving me a new appreciation. The depth, the complexity of John's gospel. It's not just a collection of stories, is it? It's an invitation to experience a whole new way of being.
It is.
And I feel like we're just getting started.
Yeah, we are.
There's so much more here to unpack. We've been talking about how the gifts of Jesus are like a never-ending feast.
It really is.
And I don't know about you, but I'm feeling incredibly hungry for more after our deep dive into John 2.
You too.
It's amazing how these seemingly simple stories, they're packed with so much depth and meaning.
It really is.
And one of the things that keeps coming up for me is this theme of irony and misunderstanding that runs throughout the chapter.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like John is deliberately playing with our expectations at the wedding, right? Jesus' no to his mother is actually a yes in disguise.
Right.
The host has no idea where the amazing wine came from.
Yeah.
And then in the temple scene, they completely missed the point of what Jesus is saying about destroying and rebuilding the temple.
It's like John is urging us to look beyond the surface.
Isn't he?
To not take things at face value.
Right.
But to really dig into the meaning.
The message behind it.
Exactly.
It makes me wonder if maybe we're missing things in our own lives.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah, like maybe we're so focused on the what that we miss the why behind it all.
That's such a powerful insight.
Is it?
I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from John 2.
What's that?
The invitation to look for that deeper meaning.
Yeah.
The hidden connections, the unexpected ways that God is working in our lives.
And to be open to the possibility that our understanding might evolve over time.
Right.
Like it did for the disciples.
Right.
Speaking of evolving understanding.
Yeah.
Our source mentioned something interesting about how the money changers and animal sellers in the temple, they just fled from Jesus.
They did.
Even though he was just one man.
It's a detail that's easy to overlook.
It is, isn't it?
But it really speaks volumes.
It does. I mean, you'd think they'd have put up more of a fight.
Right.
They were in their territory.
Yeah.
They're surrounded by all their stuff, probably outnumbered by the crowds. Even they scatter.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what did they see in Jesus?
What did they see?
That made them react that way?
I think it speaks to the authority,
Okay.
the power that emanated from him.
Wow.
Even without saying a word, his presence. It commanded respect.
Yeah.
Even fear.
Like they instinctively recognized that they were dealing with something or someone much greater than themselves.
Exactly. It's a glimpse of the divine nature shining through, reminding us that Jesus isn't just a nice teacher or a wise philosopher. He is the embodiment of God's power and love.
Which makes his act of cleansing the temple even more significant, right? He wasn't just overturning tables.
Right.
He was challenging a whole system.
A way of thinking.
A way of thinking that had become corrupt and distorted.
And that challenge, it's still relevant for us today, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It calls us to examine our own heart.
What's the motivations?
To ask ourselves, are we truly seeking God? Or are we more concerned with outward appearances?
Right.
Empty rituals, maintaining the status quo.
And to consider how we might be contributing to systems in our families, our communities, even our churches that are more about control and power than love and grace.
That's a powerful challenge.
It is.
And it leads us back to what our source emphasizes about John's purpose in writing his gospel.
Okay.
It wasn't just meant to be a historical account,
but
a personal invitation to encounter Jesus.
Who encounter Jesus.
The Word made flesh.
Not just to know about him, but to know him.
Exactly. And that encounter, it changes everything.
It does, doesn't it?
It transforms our perspective, our priorities, our very way of being in the world. It's like putting on a new pair of glasses and suddenly seeing everything in a whole new light.
It's a beautiful image.
Isn't it?
So as we wrap up this deep dive into John 2, what's the one thing you hope listeners will take away from our conversation?
For me, it's the reminder that even the most familiar Bible stories, they can hold new insights, new challenges, if we're willing to dig deeper. It's about approaching Scripture with a sense of curiosity, asking questions, wrestling with the text, and allowing the Holy Spirit to illuminate our understanding.
And to remember that we're not just reading about events that happened long ago. We're encountering the living Christ who is still speaking to us today through his word and through the whispers of his Spirit in our hearts.
That's beautiful.
So as you go about your week, what's seemingly ordinary event in your own life, looking back, now reveals God's hand at work. How did gaining that hindsight change your perspective?
That's a great question to ponder. Maybe, just maybe, by paying attention to those seemingly small details, those everyday miracles, we'll start to see the extraordinary ways that God is weaving his story into our own.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
It's been a pleasure.